Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. We'll sing a song from the spiritual world. Is this the secret to success in life? Is to carry a song from the spiritual world in your heart. Then you just go straight back into the spiritual environment. And this song is special in many ways. One is written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and it's about his own deities. It's important to become attached to deities because when we're aware of the beautiful forms of the Lord, it's like the other day, Nirkula on her birthday dressed our deities, and she found some flowers in our greenhouse. I think that's where you got them from. The Stephanotis. We have a Stephanotis plant. Stephanotis. So she put Stephanodi on the deities, and there was, each one had a flower, and the deities looked so charming. We were taken aback because in our temple room, such that it is, anybody who's been to our house, it's in a thoroughfare. It's a small house. So from walking one room to another, you have to go through the deity room. And I was just taken aback each time I walked through how beautiful they looked. And I was thinking, what would I do without having the deities to think of? There's so many other ways the mind might be engaged and pulled in one direction or another, right? And what verse would you quote from that? From Prahlāda Maharaj. Jivai kato chita mikarshati mavritiptashnonyatastvaradanam shravanam katayam granyonyatas chapaladir kwa chakarma shaktir bhavyasapatna ihave geha patim lunanti. He talks about the ways in which his senses are being pulled in every direction. Unless there's a way to focus on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we get yanked every which way. And the verse we're going to have today, which you don't have to put up, but I'm just referring to it because it's so important. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. This is Krishna in his most intimate setting of Vrindavan. And he has beautiful forms there where he wears flowers in his hair. He walks barefoot in the forest, plays a flute. He hangs out with his friends. There's nothing more sweet than seeing Krishna hanging out with his friends. In fact, in Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan, when you go there, you'll see that Krishna and Balaram is hanging out. And you go hang out with them. Everyone wants to hang out somewhere. But if you hang out with Krishna, then you're cool. If you hang out with the material energy, then you just become a fool. And so having the song Jai Radha Madhava, just to know that Krishna has these names that refer to these beautiful forms in the spiritual world. Kunja Bihari. It's a secret name, actually. Only insiders are supposed to know what Kunja Bihari means. Kunja means these little places in the forest where Krishna meets with his lovers. And a Gopi Jana Ballabha. The gopis, as we know from Vaishnava philosophy, the highest of all devotees are the gopis of Vrindavan, the Vrajavadu. The women of Vrindavan are known to have the highest quality of devotion. And so Gopi Jana means the groups of devotees there in Vrindavan. And Girivardhari, anybody who's been to Govardhan Hill, you just want to go back. And all you have to do is walk around Govardhan Hill a few times, and then you'll have this feeling that all I want to do is just walk around Govardhan Hill. Forget everything else. And Giriraj is so sweet that just watching people walk around Govardhan Hill is satisfying. Even if you can't walk, if you just sit and watch people walk around Govardhan Hill and how happy they are, then you become blissful too. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. So there's a way that the Jamuna River is there. It evokes this sense of longing for Krishna, just as we know. Sachinda Krishna, welcome back. I've been thinking about you. Thanks for coming back. So it evokes this feeling like the gopis had when they went to Kurukshetra during the eclipse of the sun, and there's a way in which they were in Kurukshetra, but they were pining for Vrindavan. And they were thinking, no, but Krishna, not here. We don't like all these soldiers, and we don't like the way you're dressed here. And the mood here is all wrong. We want to go back to Vrindavan, and we want the Jamuna, we want Govardhan Hill and so forth. That's Vrindavan, and that's the mood that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give us. Correct? Prove it. Give a verse. Okay, go ahead. I'm thinking, do your verse from the Chaitanya Manjusha. We need a plethora of microphones, please. Preferably ones that work.
I was thinking of Aradhyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayas Tadhama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachidupasana Vrajavadu Vargena Va Kalpita Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam. Yes, no, I'm mixing another. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhur Matamidam Tatradharana Para. This verse quotes about how Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave the highest philosophy, which is doing devotional service, following in the footsteps of the Vrajavasis. That's what I was thinking about.
Ramya Kachirapasana, Rajavidu. Rajavidu means the women of Vrindavan. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll sing the song, and then we'll do a short Srimad Bhagavatam class today because we have some other pressing matters to discuss. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. We're reading this morning from the Srimad Bhagavatam from Prahlāda Maharaj's prayers from 7th Canto, 9th chapter. And the verse today will be on the board in 7 seconds or less, or your money back from today's class. 5, 4, Krishna 3, Krishna 2. Naitam manastava katasu vikuntanata. No, just repeat. Sampriyate durita tushtama sadhu tivram. Nobody in the booth. Kamaturam harsha shoka vayaishanartam. No, wait. What am I doing? Yeah, I'm doing it right. You're freaking me out here. Kamaturam harsha shoka vayaishanartam. Tasmin katam tavagatim vimrishami dina. 2 more chanters. Go. Naitanadastapakatasu vikuntanata.
Sampriyate durita dushtama sadhu tivram.
Sampriyate durita dushtama sadhu tivram.
Kamaturam harsha shoka bhayai sanartam.
Kamaturam harsha shoka bhayai sanartam.
Tasmin katam tava gatim vimashami dina.
Tasmin katam tava gatim vimashami dina. Una más, por favor. Moichido, or ek.
Naitan manastava kathasu vikunjanatha.
Naitan manastava kathasu vikunjanatha.
Sampriyate durita dushtama sadhu tivram.
Sampriyate durita dushtama sadhu tivram.
Kamaturam harsha shoka bhayashanartham.
Kamaturam harsha shoka bhayashanartham.
Tasmin katam tava gatim vimashami dina.
Tasmin katam tava gatim vimashami dina. My dear Lord of the Vaikuntha planets, where there is no anxiety, my mind is extremely sinful and lusty, being sometimes so-called happy and sometimes so-called distressed. My mind is full of lamentation and fear, and it always seeks more and more money. Thus it has become most polluted and is never satisfied in topics concerning you, and therefore most fallen and poor. In such a status of life, how shall I be able to discuss your activities? Now while we're waiting for the purport, it's mentioned this verse is quoted by Jiva Goswami in his Sandarbhas as an important recognition. At a certain stage of devotional service, we may know the medicinal effect of hearing from the Srimad Bhagavatam, but our mind may have no attraction for hearing about it. So he's asking this question, Tasmin katam tava gatim vimashami dina. How will I overcome this status of life? And Prabhupada gives the following comments. Here Prahlāda Maharaj represents himself as a common man. Although he actually has nothing to do with this material world, Prahlāda is always situated in the Vaikuntha planets of the spiritual world. But on behalf of the fallen souls, he asks how, when his mind is always disturbed by material things, he can discuss the transcendental position of the Lord. The mind becomes sinful because we are always engaged in sinful activities. Anything not connected with Krishna consciousness should be understood to be sinful. Indeed, Krishna demands in Bhagavad Gita 1866, Sarvadharman Prityaja Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tvang Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishami Ma Shuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reaction. Do not fear. As soon as one surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, Krishna immediately relieves one of the reactions of sinful activities. Therefore, one who is not surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord should be understood to be sinful, foolish, degraded among men, and bereft of all real knowledge because of atheistic propensities. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 7:15. Namam duskritinu muda prapadyante naradama maya apritagyana asuram bhavam ashuta. Therefore, especially in this age of Kali, the mind must be cleansed, and this is possible only by the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. In this age, the process of chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, is the only method by which to cleanse the sinful mind. When the mind is completely cleansed of all sinful reactions, one can then understand his duty in the human form of life. The Krishna Consciousness movement is meant to educate sinful men so that they may become pious simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nameva Kevalam, Kalau Nasteva, 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 Gatiranyata, to cleanse the heart so that one may become sober and wise in this age of Kali. There is no value to any method other than the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Prahlāda Maharaj has confirmed this process in previous verses. Twadvirya Gayana Mahamritam Magnachita. Context? Say the verse. Naivod Vijay Para Duratya Yavaitaranyas Tadviryagayana maha mrita magna chitta shocheta to vimukacheta sa indriyarta maya sukaya bharam udvahato vimudham. Prahlāda Maharaj further confirms that if one's mind is always absorbed in thought of Krishna, that very qualification will purify one and keep one purified always. To understand the Lord and His activities, one must free his mind from all contamination of the material world. Okay, let me see if I'm speaking English. To understand the Lord and His activities, one must free his mind from all contamination of the material world, and this one can achieve by simply chanting the Lord's holy name. Thus, one becomes free of all material bondage. From my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, all the previous acharyas, and to all of you present here today. Vansha kalpatarubhascha kripasinabhe evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Naitan manas tapakatasu vikuntana sampriyate durita dushtam sadhu tifram. So this is a lament that Prahlāda is making, in that he's saying that his mind is not attracted. And it's a beautiful name, isn't it? Vikuntanatha, the Lord of Vaikuntha. And topics, katasu, about Vaikuntha. There's topics of the material world, and there's topics of the spiritual world, and Krishna there. It's one of the reasons that Krishna comes to the world to make his appearance. Sarve hyami vidikaras tavasatvanamno brahmadayo vayamivesha nachodvijan shemaya bhutaya utatma sukhaya jasya vikriditam bhagavato ruchiravatare. Prahlāda says that the Lord comes for the benefit of everyone, to reveal His beautiful form so that we can see it. And He comes in different forms. Itam nritirya deva jashavatara loka lokan pipavayasi hamsi jagat pratipan dharman mahapurusha pas yugana vritam channa kalo yada babastri yugota sato. And he says, Itam nritirya, he comes as a human, nri, animal, tirya, he comes as tortoise, fish, and he also comes chana kalau. In the Kali Yuga, he comes in a covered form, just to not disturb anybody's mind, but he appears as a devotee to teach the process so that we can go back home, back to Godhead. And ter hatama namastuti karma puja karmaspratish charanayo shravanam katayam samsevaya tvaivineti. What? Shat angaya kim bhaktim jana paramahamsa katao lubeta. Prahlāda concludes his prayers by saying there's these simple processes that one can engage in to remember Krishna in the spiritual world. So that's the purpose of our ISKCON of Silicon Valley. It is to purify our minds and hearts and come to the spiritual platform. And we have a good start here because we've adopted a process that it follows in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. That's important, as Prahlāda mentions, that he wants to follow in the footsteps of Brahma and his sampradaya. Give me that verse. He's Ramadayo. No, it's what? In any case, he's saying, I'm just going to follow in the footsteps of Brahma and those in his sampradaya, and therefore I'll be successful. You can give it to me when you find it. I'll thank you later. And so that's what we're doing here. And in the process, we have to be essence seekers. Remember that the main purpose of us coming together is for self-purification. In any process, in any discipline, there's a way in which one may practice for some time and then adopt various mentalities that could divert one's mind again. And those might include feeling entitled, that I've been here for 3 days longer than somebody else, therefore I should have a better seat or a better room. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur abhorred that mentality so much so that when the devotees in his organization had been given a gift of a beautiful new temple, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta noticed that his senior devotees were quibbling over who got which room. That disturbed him so much, it was so antithetical to the purpose of the organization that he indicated that he might not stay much longer in the world based on that sort of mentality. And he said that we were better off in Ultadanga Junction Road, which at the time was a very slovenly dwelling and simple. They, according to the lore of that time, barely had enough money for rice, which is hard to understand since they live in Bengal. But because they had the right mood, they didn't feel entitled, they felt preaching is the essence. Then they felt happy and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was happy. Along with success, along with developing some acumen for devotional service, or the trappings thereof in an organization, we may also develop a sense of pride or a sense of entitlement. And then we lose our purpose, we lose our way, which is that we should feel some lamentation in our heart that I've not achieved this deep attachment to Krishna. And there are ways in which we can be vigilant in our prosecution of Krishna consciousness together. One is to be communicative in proper ways. There's ways in which when we have problems in our life or we have concerns about anything, we should find somebody that we can talk to and work them out so that we feel settled and we have an understanding. It doesn't matter where you go in the world or what organization you go to, when there's people involved and there's generations involved and there's various cultures involved, there's going to be a sense of conflict amongst cultures. Even today, reading the Purport, we see the masculine pronoun being used again and again. Someone brought that up to me in New York when I was giving class. I didn't really answer it. But even when I was going to school, university that is, here in the Bay Area in 1994, that it was just a prevalent discussion about pronouns. Now, of course, it's become taken almost to the absurd, that people make jokes about it. But my point is, when you transfer from one era to the next, there's a way that the various ways of thinking, being, speaking, and writing, and so forth, they're carried forward. And if you try to compare one era to another, then you may miss the point, the essence of what's happening. At the same time, it's important, as Prabhupada mentions in the first canto, 4th chapter, 1st verse in the paragraph, that when we're presenting Krishna consciousness, we should not screw out any new meaning. We should take what the acharyas have given. However, we should present it in a way that's relevant and appreciable to the modern audience that we're speaking to. That's the purpose of the disciplic succession. We don't have disciplic succession by Veda base, although there are modern methods of pulling up all kinds of information. One may then misinterpret it. One has to have a holistic and comprehensive approach to Krishna consciousness, including taking the mood of what is the mood of the acharyas that's being passed down, the mood of the most recent acharya as carried forth by those who were there and who can explain what the exact mood and intentions were. And that has to be harmonized in one generation after the next because things change. And that has to be accommodated. That's how the disciplic succession goes on. It's no small miracle that we're all able to be here together. And it's also incumbent on us, in order to stay vibrant, that we remember the essence of Krishna consciousness. We're not our bodies. We have nothing to do with the material world. The external trappings are the external trappings. That's how Krishna starts off the Bhagavad Gita. We're all spiritual souls. And his highest teachings are to engage us in seeing all living beings, vidya vinaya sampane brahmane gavihastani shuni chaiva shupakecha padita samadarshina, as equal. Because although there are various manifestations according to the modes of material nature to accommodate the perverted desire of individual souls, those are simply external temporary manifestations. And a learned person, Krishna says, sees beyond those external trappings and relates to the soul. There are ways in which we also recognize the importance of social intercourse at a particular time, place, and circumstance. For instance, although we see a tiger as a soul, I mean, who wouldn't see a tiger as a soul? You just look in his eyes and go, yeah, I know, you're a little jiva. But you still wouldn't want to tempt fate and go up and put your hand out for him, because he might think it was a snack. And that's not his fault. That's the modes of material nature. So there's this dual process going on in the culture, which is more complicated than most people care to look at. The founding fathers of America said everyone's created equal. And they have the spiritual ideal there. But then there's a way in which, well, just ask Sukeshri. When she has classes, she said the most important or useful way of having a classroom is to administer to the students according to their level of appreciation of the material. She has proof of that. So there are ways that we're simultaneously balancing one side of the world with another. And it does take communication, it does take balance, and it does take understanding. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Although there is a one-size-fits-all, we're all spiritual. There's also the commingling of the matter and the spirit, so that makes it exponentially harder. And can it be done? Absolutely. There are ways to do that. We simply have to, first of all, be fixed on ourselves and purifying our own selves and minds, pursuant to Prahlāda Maharaj's prayers in the verse. And as a local organization representing Krishna Consciousness, details matter, and the ways in which we interact with one another matter. We're not a corporation, per se, that we're just worried about the bottom line. We are worried about our own purification. We don't have to think always just what are the numbers. People matter. Individual devotees matter. And in that way we should observe, or I should say may. Oops, I just said should again. I don't like saying that word so much. There are ways in which communities may miraculously thrive, even as we're dealing with various dimensions in which we have to understand and balance how to live in the world and survive and interact with one another in ways that are helpful and progressive, and at the same time see all living beings as spiritual souls and also act as a spirit soul. It's a balancing act. And in a testing ground like ISKCON of Silicon Valley, our purpose is to create an environment in which everyone's invited to do service. And what's most important about our organization is not the bottom line, but it is that we develop a service attitude. And that includes being patient and communicative with all of the members of the organization, not overlooking the individuals. Isn't it when we go on Sankirtan and we happen to go to some far-flung place like Cupertino and we knock on some door where we know nobody's ever going to go there except us. We just, Super Soul tells us, if you didn't walk up here, nobody else was ever going to do it. Have you ever been to a place like that? I've been to places like that. Not in Cupertino, but other places, like in Southern California. There was a Vietnamese mall. I like the Vietnamese people. They're most upwardly mobile people. Actually, they're highly spiritually oriented and so forth. So I like to go get their association whenever I can. We went to a Vietnamese mall. It was 3 levels. And the top level was mostly closed. No shops were open, but we went up. I went up there anyway because I saw one shop open on the far end. They really didn't need footfall. They just needed an office. And they were on their phone, and they were very surprised when we came in. And slightly resistant, but I think they figured that we came all the way up there, and we bothered to come in their place of business, and we seemed civil and good-hearted, so they humored us and took a few books and reciprocated with a donation upon our request. But when I left there, I thought, unless we hoofed it up those stairs and walked all the way to the end with a sense of adventure, nobody would have ever gone up there. And I felt satisfied. So we have great opportunity to reach out to people in various places and give them an opportunity to take to Krishna consciousness. And while we're together, our focus is best on how to hear and chant and purify ourselves, and also how to serve cooperatively, and also how to be very, very careful in the way that we deal with one another. This is the true sign of an advanced Krishna conscious organization, is how careful we are in our dealings with others. As an example, we should hear an alarm going off in our heads if we begin talking about people behind their back. If we notice it, we can we have permission to stop the conversation and say, wait, let's not talk about the other person until he or she is here. And then we'll discuss. It's okay if you're praising them. But if there's this sense of, I'd like to air all my grievances right now about such and such or so and so, and I feel free, there's no breaks because they're not here. We should have a sense of fear in that, because that will result in Naitam manas tavakatasa vikunta nata sampriyate durita dushnam asadu divram. We'll lose our taste for hearing and chanting. And we will get a taste, but it's a kind of taste that ruins you for spiritual life. It's very subtle, but if you become critical of devotees, then it becomes a source of woe and weal. You know what that is? Look up weal and woe. So there are ways in which, as we move forward, we can come back to the basics, and that is, it's important to hear and chant together. It's also important to develop relationships with the devotees and work out any kind of concerns that we have in proper ways so that we can overcome any of the perceived differences. I always appreciated Prabhupada acknowledged the fact that there will be differences of opinion in various ways. It was helpful that he acknowledged it. There are ways in which one can say there's only one way to think, and there's only one way to do things, and make an ultimatum, say, if you're not in harmony with that, then you might as well take a long walk off a short pier. But in any relationship, one-to-one or in a group, it's highly effective if we adopt the spiritual principles and say, what are the workarounds in our relationships? And then also be mature and come and discuss with those that we may need to. Now, there may be cases that there needs to be due process. That's also important in an organization, that somebody also has to look and see that how are there managerially alternative arrangements to be made in an organization so that we can overcome any of the snags that we run into. Somebody has to be looking and overseeing and brainstorming, say, how would Prabhupada deal with this? What are the spiritual ways that we can reorganize, reshuffle, and such? And that has to take place on a regular basis, and sometimes it comes to a point where people feel tension, and then that has to be dealt with. But it's not a cause for us to become overly concerned, because there is a spiritual solution to everything, and we have to be patient and work on it, just like, as I said a moment ago, in a personal one-to-one relationship, taking time to discuss deeply what are concerns and then processing them, then we can become highly effective. Now you have 1 minute to ask any questions. Yes?
So Maharaj, if you could elaborate a little bit more on not talking about people behind their backs, because sometimes when you are managing something, then you might want to do Guyam Akhyati Prachiti, and so what are some of the things that we should keep in mind when we are doing that?
When there's a sense of unrestricted criticism that doesn't serve a particular purpose, and it's not couched carefully in language that is respectful, then it becomes inflammatory and it can become dangerous. But when there is a need to discuss a particular person, it should be done respectfully. And also, we should never assume that we know everything about a particular person or a situation. We should think that there's two sides to every chapati that was ever made, and therefore it's helpful to get both sides before we make decisions. I've been embarrassed before in situations where I assumed that I knew everything, and then when I found out the other side, I thought, oops. And therefore it's more helpful to be reserved, and that's a word that we can use is be reserved and be respectful and careful if we have to bring up points about somebody. And don't take the etiquette out of it. Leave that part in. It's protective guardrails for us. And we should find within our hearts, we should be self-searching and see, why am I saying this? Is it for a purpose, and am I doing it in a way that there's a solution? And we know this in relationships, individual relationships. If you know somebody well enough and you're in a relationship and you become emotional and you say something to them, you intuit as you're saying it that I'm doing something that's going to inflame the situation rather than improve it, don't you? Please say yes. And it's similar when we're dealing with lots of people. We should be respectful and careful and helpful and try to balance it with a sense of giving the person the benefit of the doubt. Just as Gopal Bhatta Goswami, you can remember him. He just signed a little sheet that said, I won't criticize any devotees. You can do that. We have a little sheet, you can sign it. And then you're not obligated to criticize any devotees. And if someone says, let's have a session, and you say, sorry, I already signed the sheet. It's the Gopal Bhatta Goswami sheet. No, it was Raghunath Bhatta Goswami sheet. He said, that's all right, chants Hare Krishna. That's a very high up position. Then when you get into a situation where you're managing, you can keep that in your heart and then discuss it with that protective covering about a person who happens to be in our midst, who's chanting Hare Krishna, who's done tons of service, who we love very much, but temporarily we just have going in a different direction. And I've found again and again, I've never had it fail, that the idea of workarounds bring turnarounds. If you really note that one of the tendencies of the emotional mind and heart is to make an ultimatum and say, if it's not this way, then it can't be any way. It limits our ability to grow as an organization, as in any relationship. So I'm just saying all this because I think we're at a pivotal point here at ISKCON of Silicon Valley. This place is pregnant in many ways. But we're poised for growth, spiritual growth, which is very much wanted, but it's wanted in the right way. It doesn't have to be, there's lots of cells that grow too fast and they're not wanted. We grow naturally, and we grow with the mantra that how we do is more important than what we do. It's not just about the numbers, it's not about the bricks and mortar. How many bricks and mortar can you pile up? All of those things come in due course of time as we learn. The most important aspects is how we deal with one another, how we deal with ourselves, and how we are organized to show compassion to the general public. Prahlāda Maharaj is not saying these things like Naivo Dvijay Para Daratyadya Vaitaranya. And Prayena Deva Muniya Swavimukti Kama Maunam Charanti Vijanena Para. Did I say it wrong? Maunam Charanti Vijanena Parartha Nishta Naitan Vihaya Kripanan Vivamuksha Ego Nanyam Twadasya Sharanam Brahmato Nupashe. Right? Mauna Vrata Shutatapo Dhyayana Sudharma Vakya Raho Japa Samayada Apavargya. Next line. Praya Param Purushate Twajitendriyanam. Best line in the whole thing is coming up, right? Varta Bhavantyunana Vatra Tudambikanam. All these are about his compassion for the fallen souls. And we got no business here in Silicon Valley as bhakti yogis, except for one, and that is to talk to the people at Apple and Google and Salesforce and everyone else, because they're good people. They're smart people. They're missing one ingredient, a little bit of love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you get one little molecule of love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it's all good. That Apple campus, we don't mind if they hand it over for a kirtan hall. Or Google can open up all their facility for laundry and we'll just do our laundry there. Whatever it is, but everyone's missing it. And we have it, so we should feel compassion, distribute it. But first and foremost, we have to develop this sense of respect for all of us together. We also have to remember, and just remember that all you can do is all you can do, but all you can do is enough. And do the best you can with what you have right now. Do the best you can with what you have right now. If we get too overheated for what things should be like, be more oriented towards what things are, and then cool-headedly draw plans for how it can be better and improved. That's our wealth. That's always been the wealth of ISV, is to be heartfelt together and be very observant of the ways in which we deal with devotees. We've got a confluence of exalted devotees here, and we have a huge vision for expansion, but it has to be built on the subtleties, which are the most important, of how we carefully deal with one another. Now I'll stop my pontification. My diatribe comes to an end. And I thank everybody very much for all the services that you're doing. We're really lucky. And yes. Okay, Prabhu, please go ahead. Okay. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radhamana Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmi Sringadev, if you so desire, please instill in our hearts a mood of service to the devotees. And please let us remember that the essence of devotional service is to save one soul at a time, beginning with ourselves. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.